Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Black and Mild Podcast. It's your boy Adrian here, and I am joined today by my illustrious co-hosts. Again, first and foremost, Mr. Ira Chaffel. Ira, what's happening, man?
I'm good, man. Good. This is episode 3 of the reboot, so I'm pretty fired up.
Yeah,
we got some momentum going.
We do episode 3, season 2. You know what I'm saying? Again, man, we're like a Netflix special. Hopefully, we can get along last season like Stranger Things or something. You know. And again, we are joined as well by somebody new to the team, but adding a lot of value to the team. It's kind of like having, it's like she's like the Terrence Mann of podcast. You know what I'm saying? Comes in,
rookie of the year.
Rookie of the year just comes in, man, just to kind of like do it all. You know what I'm saying? So, Bree, what's happening?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. And man, we are joined by someone who is not, someone who is oh my God, let me do that again, Caleb. We can cut that out. I was like, some stranger. I was like, all right, so we have somebody join us today who's not a stranger to the podcast. I mean, from the first time we did the podcast, he was willing to jump on the podcast. Again, one of the managing partners for the Table Hospitality. Again, many of you guys know here who are people in Tallahassee know of MadSo Social, but we are joined by the one and only Mr. Matt Thompson. Matt, what's happening, man?
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you. Matt, why don't you tell people a little bit, because one of the things I know about you, every time I turn around, I look, there's something new that's happening, starting. So I would want to give like this whole layout, but I'm like, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, I know it's like MadSo Social, then there's Charlie Park, there's this, and and then all this stuff. So why don't you let the people know what all you actually do?
So we have MadSo Social, Social Catering and Events, Township, Sodo, Charlie Park, and Social Kitchen are now the For the Table brands as of right now.
When are you going to get out and do something?
I know, right? Yeah.
What have you been doing all this time?
So the good news is I think we're at the part where we're leveraging what we do a little bit more. So I don't know how much more we're going to create as much as grow what we currently do.
No, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, you had a post a few weeks ago on social media. I can't remember what spurred it, and you kind of recap some of your numbers, employees, and it was just like looking at it on paper on the computer screen. It's like awe-inspiring. Does it still feel that way to you when you look at the raw numbers?
It does, man. I mean, having 300 plus employees within the organization is a daunting number.
Yeah.
And I can say that's where I spend most of my time every day, right? With people come people problems.
Yeah.
Not that they're bad. I'm just saying, they come in all shapes and sizes. And so we're constantly talking and refining and trying to do things to make things as best as possible for employees while protecting the brand and protecting customers, and that delicate balance that always happens.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why we want to bring Matt on is because, again, we're a little bit a year since, a little bit over a year since the beginning of this pandemic, which, again, especially in your industry and as a business, especially in restaurants, man, it just really was it was a hard hit industry, and the fact that you guys been able to get to the other side of this. So pretty much today we want to just kind of unpack that, because I think it's, everybody can, go through it, but I always tell people there's something about, man, when you let people get in and actually tell their story, because there's so much you can actually learn from it. The fact of, man, being able to survive and to adjust in a completely different world, man, it was going from, man, it was all about the space, and then, man, people pivoting to takeout, and just all the stuff that came with it. So we're super excited. But before we get into that, guys, again, want to encourage you guys, make sure, man, you like, you subscribe, and hey, write a review, man. We love the reviews we get a chance to read. Again, make sure, man, only 5 stars here. Don't give us a negative review. You know what I'm saying? If you do, man, go go on YouTube and thumbs down somebody else, like a Gator video or something.
And you can hit us up on Twitter too.
Yes.
We should give our Twitter handles.
Yeah. Make sure we hit up on Twitter. Matter of fact, we'll put it in the show notes. We'll put our Twitter. Ira, what's yours? Go ahead and give yours out.
It's just my name. It's hard enough to spell, but it's at IRASCHOFFEL.
There we go. Mine is at Adrian Crawford.
And mine's Bree.Nicole99.
There we go. Bree.Nicole99, man.
Please don't ever tweet at me.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. That's such a...
Matt, give us yours.
No, I'm good. Don't tweet at me. Like, I took Twitter off my phone last year. Cesspool of negativity.
Oh, man. All right.
I can't handle it.
We're uplifting it.
Oh, yeah. I'm popping in back a little bit here and there, a little bit more. I think I did a live... I wouldn't call it a live tweet, but I was watching the softball game.
Okay.
And so I went out to Oklahoma, and then I came back. And I was watching one of the softball games, and I started tweeting. I got a couple emails from some people like, who was running the Twitter account last night? That was me. I had a couple bourbons. Leave me alone.
Carried away.
There we go. Well, man, at this time, again, I want to encourage you guys. So, we're going to go to one of our favorite part of our episode, man, our time, man, air it out. And so, man, we are here at Air It Out. So, man, we're going to start. So we're going to go ladies first. Bree, what is your air it out this week?
Okay, so I'm gonna go positive this time.
Wow. Hey,
Last week I bashed Tallahassee for the lack of shopping that you can do here, but I'm gonna give a pro. So we have a Culver's now. And I've never been there before. I went there last night for the first time, and I didn't get the food, but I got the what's
Custard?
it called? Yes, the custard.
What's the deal with it? People act
Oh
like
my
it's
gosh.
this unbelievable invention, and it's like I mean, I had custard before. What's the big deal?
We don't have a lot of ice cream in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it, we don't have anything kind of in that category.
Right.
Not a whole lot. Lofty pursuits, of course. I mean, I don't
Tallahassee's doing what Tallahassee does. A new place opens up, and people are. That's all everybody's talking about. So it was good. It was legit.
Yeah, the custard is so good.
Really?
So good.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she came again. Bree lives with us, so she comes home last night. She's like, "This stuff was amazing." And so, all right, so there we go. Positive vibes. There you go. Hey, taking it in again, stepping up for Corey.
That will happen often.
As I say, normally got positive vibes, Corey in here. Man. So, all right, what you got, man?
I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go the other way. Not terribly, but I'm gonna ask people to open their eyes and maybe reconsider their actions in restaurants. And this is fitting because of who our guest is. And he actually knows who I'm talking about. My daughter, Alexa, back about a year ago, was going to come work for you guys. But she's a dummy. She messed up something. but she's working fast food.
Okay.
And she comes home with these stories. I can't wait till she gets home at night for these stories because these people come in and they're out of something, or the price isn't what they thought it was going to be, or they can't use their promo card or whatever it is, and they take it out on the kid working the cash register. And it's just like, people, stop that. If you go into a fast food establishment, the person working the cash register did not cause your problems. Like if they're out of ketchup or if they're out of whatever it is, just consider the fact that you're yelling at somebody's 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And these people, they'll come in and they take it out on the kid working the register who doesn't know anything, at least in my kid's case.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage you to either ask calmly for a manager, or if you came in with your problems, leave them at the door. It's not their fault. And I'm sure you see that in your operation. By the hour.
Oh, it's pretty wild.
I don't understand why it's not the server's fault. It's not. I would assume in most cases it's not, or the person running the cash register. Yeah. But people come in and act like they're, letting out all their frustrations on that kid behind the counter. So I'm going to implore people to stop doing that.
Well, we've heard the saying, crap rolls downhill, right?
Yeah.
I have a theory that for most people, the restaurant industry is their downhill. Right? They're working.
This is our turn.
This is our turn, right? I am taking, my boss gave it to me, or to the middle manager. The middle manager passed it down to the staff, and then that staff person or whoever, that's their downhill. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the things that you're seeing with people not coming back to work. They just, why deal with that? Why deal with that? Because it's a constant battle.
Yeah.
So. I'll give her credit though, man. She's learned well, thank you so much. Have a nice day. And she kills them with kindness, which I think just irritates them more.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
man. Listen to the Bible verse talking about that. What kind of it's like leaping like hot coals on someone's head when you're like actually kind to them. You're like, wow, that's a real tweet. Like, literally, it's one of the proverbs. You know what I'm saying? Man, here's mine. You know me. I'm 90% negative vibes all the time. So my negative vibe kind of goes a little bit to this. Is the idea of I just wish that people would just start to just take a deep breath and critically think about stuff. And here's what I'm saying. I am so over people giving thin solutions to incredibly thick problems in the world. It's like when I listen to politicians, that's all they do. They give thin solutions to like super thick problems. So it's like, man, when you think about we're mad here, we think about the restaurant industry and everything that's going on. It's like, oh, everybody's got to, man, get back to work. And you're like, okay, and like Matt, like you just said a great point, Matt. You're like, well, no, it's how people maybe were treated in the restaurant industry from customers. Maybe they're not coming back. That's one part of it. There's a part, man, but then everyone's like, oh, it's because we're giving all stimulus money out.
No.
Then that's it. So that's what one side will say. But then you're like, no, that's a multiple level problem. We talk about, oh man, like the wealth gap in the country. It's like that's a multiple level problem that we have. Or hey, race. that's a multiple level problem. And so it's like, I'm just tired of people doing that, because what it is, when people give me those things, I'm being honest with you, I'll tell somebody this. I just don't even take you as an intellectually serious person when you give me a thin solution to a thick problem, because nothing in life's that way. Nothing in life's that complex. And it drives me crazy that politicians live and do this when they're actually called to like go out there and help solve problems. And I think that's one of my biggest things. I just want people to say, hey, when you start to critically think, you actually will come up with multiple levels of solutions to problems when you just slow down. But we live in a world today that's so sped up, that's so anxiety driven. Everybody lives in their silos that, man, it's like the quick, easy thing. You know, I saw a poll recently that said, 2020, biggest issues were this. Republicans said, hey, Republicans said it was immigration, and liberals were that was their biggest threats to America. Democrats said the biggest threat to America it was Trump supporters, and I cannot remember. I think it was like, I can't remember what the second one was, but one was for sure like Trump supporters. You're like, so pretty much what you're saying, like, hey, both parties are driving like, hate each other, and then we're gonna get somewhere. You're like, dude, it's way more than that.
And the problem, to your point, like with the politicians, they know better. Sometimes people don't know better. Maybe sometimes people just everyday working Joe, or they maybe haven't taken the time to really think about it. Mm-hmm. But too often the politicians are preying on those people and just going with what they think is going to rally them to their side or their cause, which is just the worst.
To be able to keep, and again, like I said, that's my whole thing, is be able to keep power. And, so that's going to be a really interesting thing. So, well, guys, hey, we're going to dive in. Matt, you got something you want to get off your chest, man? Before we move
man,
away?
you guys just tapped on a bunch of stuff. I mean, when Ira went with the whole, Ira went down the path of don't take it out on people. I mean, one of the biggest struggles we're dealing with right now is not holding the reservation. Meaning, if you have a reservation for 10, you're showing up with 18 and expect us to be able to just fabricate chairs out of nothing. So that was one. And then you tapped on to something, and I was called in a comment on Tallahassee Democrat recently. I was called just a rich white business owner. Apparently that's an easy out, I guess, to a very complicated problem. And one of the things that group of people it was the situation with the boosters and getting the money through the blueprint.
Oh yeah.
And so I was speaking on behalf of that, because clearly that impacts our employees. And I don't look at it from a football standpoint. I looked at it from I've always said Doak Campbell Stadium is our most underutilized asset in Tallahassee. We need more programming going on there. So if we need to put the infrastructure in to make that happen, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And I somewhere along the way, the opposition was basically saying that restaurant jobs aren't permanent jobs. They're not permanent. Or construction jobs are also not permanent jobs. Well, last time I checked, a construction worker goes from one job to the next job. It's a project-based work, but it's a permanent job, right?
Yeah.
Our employees, it's a permanent job.
Like it's less valid or something.
It's less valid, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a fair, man, if it's less valid, the people that we have making everywhere from $18 to $30 an hour off tips, man, I'm in the wrong business, I guess, and so it was, so I guess that would be my big one is stop calling things not permanent jobs. It's pretty permanent to the person that's working it at that particular
and I can speak to that. My family was all in the restaurant business. My dad, my mom, my brother, that's all the work they ever knew. And my dad graduated with a college degree, but got into the restaurant business and made more money in that and stuck with that the rest of his life. And it's a good career. This whole judging people's career, Adrian, I know you and Corey have talked about before, this notion that unless you have a career that you got a piece of paper from a college that took you to an office, that anything else is like less than that.
Dude, listen, and especially with the world, what COVID just sped everything up to expose that to what it's going to be. I mean, listen, the world we're going into, our last podcast with Vince Hunt on here talking about VR, AR, all those things that are coming our way. I'm with you, man. It's like everybody, this is what I tell people, anxiety drives you to be an expert of everybody else. And the key in life is being an expert itself. So like saying somebody just throws out there, man, you're a rich white business guy. You're like, okay, to say a statement like that is like, okay, have you talked to him? Have you had a conversation with him? Have you seen evidence of this, of him just being a rich white business guy who don't care for anybody else? Like, that's what I'm saying. That right there is an anxiety-filled response in our current moment. It's just, but nobody wants to do that.
Like you're exploiting the workers or something.
Yeah, like you're exploiting the workers or doing stuff like that. But when I sit there and have a conversation, now if I sit down, if somebody doesn't know Matt and they sit down with Matt, and all of a sudden after being around him, having conversations with him because they see this, and this is evidence of that, that's a whole different ballgame, which is not true. But the whole point though is like, stop being experts. That's one thing I've stopped doing. I'm like, if I don't know you,
correct.
If I don't know you, then I'm not going to have really an opinion about you until your actions show that consistently. Now, if all of a sudden Matt is just constantly out there doing things, that would speak to that, that's a whole different ballgame. But most people don't. They just see something and I'm like, oh, you're this. Or for me, they'll just say like, again, people know. I literally had somebody recently say this, oh man, like, oh, you're pushing a black agenda. I'm like, have you ever been around me? I'm like, there's so many white people who work for me. I'm like, what do you mean I'm putting a black agenda? I'm failing at whatever that agenda, whatever the agenda is. I'm like, I'm failing at that agenda, so I should be fired for it. But the point is like, but that's what people do because their anxiety. If I talk anything about justice, it's like, well, this is who you are. And you're like, but that's our world we're living in. And I think the key though, that we always say this, is people learning how to be a non-anxious presence, be able to walk in there and be like, that's fine, you can think that, but I'm not going to let that affect the work that I do, because at the end of the day, when I'm telling people to do the work, will just speak for itself. In the end.
Man, it got like we're doing something for Juneteenth.
Yep.
Which we're technically not really doing anything. We're telling you to go spend your money at black-owned restaurants in Tallahassee.
Yeah, that's huge.
Because Tallahassee Foodies started a list. Mm-hmm. So we bought the URL, TallahasseeBlackOwned.com, pointed it at that list, and we're telling you, go spend your money this week and this weekend there. Mm. And you would thought, I don't know, man, like a race war broke out on our comments.
Really?
Like, yeah, go read the comments a little bit on the Madison Social Instagram. You would, why does everything have to be about race? Well, because that's what the holiday is about. It's about like, what do you mean? Like, and then, why can't you have a list of white-owned restaurants? Well, I don't know. What are you talking about?
White-owned restaurant is
what does it matter?
You talk about, listen, but here's the thing, you talk about white-owned restaurant. Listen, close your eyes. And whatever building you hit, it'll probably be a white-owned restaurant. Like, what are you talking? But it is a good point you say, because we had this other pod, we were talking about Juneteenth, and people are like, well, why does it have to be about race? It's like, because we celebrate July 4th, the independence, and our independence, when you enslave people. And 2 years later, they're like, no, you do have to do that. And I appreciate you guys, Matt, doing that, because again, at the end of the day, you're never going to be, and I've always said this to you, like, you're never going to be like, for some people, it's not enough. Correct. For others, it's too much. Like, literally, you putting out something like that as minimal, and that's a big step.
The too much people I've seen have moved on to something else. The moths, the moth mentality, where they just float around and they go to, I've noticed they've kind of moved on.
Okay.
So now it's the opposite.
Now it's the people saying, why are you even doing
the laggards,
anything?
right? Yeah, that finally come. There's people that are really cutting edge and probably ahead of a lot of people.
Yep.
And they're angry because not everybody's caught up.
Yep.
That happened last year with the Doak Campbell situation, which I think broke on your podcast, right?
Yeah. We
thought the conversation, right? And so that's why I took Twitter off my phone. I got to be honest with you, was we were tagged and brought into that. And I'm just like, man, I don't even know the issue. Yeah. Like, I walked into Doak Campbell Stadium thousands of times over my FSU career and fan career. I had no idea who Doak Campbell was.
Yeah.
Until 2017 or whenever it was, and we were going to do, how do we celebrate that building? Does it have a birthday? Looked it up on Wikipedia. Oh, that's the first president of FSU. Oh, look at that. Never cared after that.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I knew about Doak Campbell. And so for me to read up on, and take the time, we just said, time out before you tag us and ask us to media hijack us, basically, and our followers. Let us read up on it. And for some people, that was like, oh, I know what that reading up means. That means you're going to ignore it. And it's like, and I just got sick of it. I got to be honest. After going through everything, I just got sick of it. And I was like, you know what? I'm taking Twitter off my phone. And I'm going to take away that stimuli, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going, and so far, man, it's made me a lot more. I used to hate the term mental health because I didn't know people our age.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
You guys use that all the time, right? I'm not trying to
overused. Overused.
I'm not trying to do anything like ageist over here, but like we don't talk like that. There or at least most people I know don't talk like that.
Yep.
But maybe it is something our generation needs to talk about a little more. I don't think everything's an anxiety problem and everything is
sometimes it's just stress.
Yeah, it's okay to have stress. Yep, it's all right.
Yeah, 100%.
It makes you resilient. It makes you cope. It makes you move on.
Yep.
But I certainly I feel better that I took Twitter off my phone. It was one of the greatest decisions I ever made, and I make money off Twitter.
Yeah, and that's what that's the way I look at it. And I think I feel like I've done a pretty good job with it because I've always been in it. One of the best things that ever happened to me was working in a small town newspaper. Because when you work at a small town newspaper, and I worked in Thomasville, Georgia, it was like Twitter before Twitter. If you wrote something people didn't like, you heard about it. If you wrote about Johnny fumbling in the second quarter, you heard about it. And so that kind of toughened me up for that, and also kind of prepared me for that, and got me to not worry so much and really focus on what do I believe is right and what do I believe is okay. And if I'm okay with myself, to not worry so much about other people. And so that's my approach on Twitter. I do use it like you use it for marketing, and we use it to build brands and to make money. But man, I'm not trying to win anybody over. I'm not trying to, just because you can't win that game on that platform. There's always, as you just said, there's always going to be somebody. There's never going to be a consensus. And anybody you make happy, there's somebody else you're making mad. And so if you try to go into it with that approach of, I'm going to win Twitter today, or I'm going to, this is going to be, I think you're just setting yourself up for disaster.
Yeah. And again, I love, this whole point of this pod is always about authentic conversation. A lot of times we come in, hey, we're going to talk about this, and it kind of goes. And that's the beauty of the podcast we're doing. Bree, I do want to ask you this because, again, as we grew up, again, I talk a lot about mental and emotional health, but I also grew up, and again, I was like with Gen X. I mean, you grew up with boomers. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you grow up with boomers as parents. So they were like, I say, boomers don't, they don't feel anything. You know what I'm saying? So then you get to us, and there's a little bit more, but for your generation, you're a little bit of a hybrid because there's such you're not like the typical generation. She's more like, sometimes you're around like, yeah, you can feel that. That's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess I would ask you, you grew up, you pretty much grew up with Twitter, you're coming up, you grew up with Twitter. How do you think that affects, your generation from a mental health standpoint, social and things? Because I tell people everything's not an anxiety attack. I agree with you, Matt, but it's also, I was looking man, this generation is growing up with just constant feedback all the time and nonstop connection, where we grew up, where it's yeah, man, if somebody felt some type of way about it, I couldn't find out till the next day of school.
And dramatic terminology.
They
also say vernacular is extremely dramatic. Oh, you're toxic. Oh, I don't know.
Or hey man, I'm being, I'm being bullied. I'm like, well, when I'm being bullied, I mean you're getting beat up for 8 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Not somebody said a bad word about you. So what does that mean? So yeah, how's that for you? Because you're kind of a hybrid. How's it impacted your generation, and you feel impacted even you?
What I would say specifically is that it definitely affects us a ton. But I also think there's levels where when you grow up with something, you naturally start to get a little bit of the resilience for it. So while in some ways, I think that it is harder for someone who is in the generation before mine to go on social media and then feel a little bit more of the effects of it because they haven't experienced it before. So I think sometimes we kind of the word's not cope, but we kind of adjust to our environment and the things we do. And social media is so heavy a part of the experience of what I just grew up in. But I also think there's a level where it affects us a ton. Obviously, as humans, whether you have social media or not, external validation and comparison happens all the time. It's always there. So social media just increases that. The fact that I don't just see what the person living next to me is doing it when I walk outside my front door. I see millions of people every single day on multiple different streaming services. I see what they're doing, and then I'm going to obviously compare myself to them. And so I think in that way, it affects a ton. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, kind of transitioning, pivoting, Matt, we want to jump right into this idea with this pandemic. And again, we talked about, just really just surviving. So I guess I want to start off with just, you kind of a little bit, man, walk us through a little bit as much as you can, call when you realize at the beginning of COVID, oh, this is about to really be a thing.
So that had to be, we have an event that we do every year called the Tallahassee Wine Mixer, and March 7th. It's also one of my favorite days of the year, by the way. I call it the greatest Knoll day. It's one of those hidden days. It's that first Saturday in March where typically basketball plays a home game and baseball has a home game, and the weather's always gorgeous, and it's just one of the most fun days. And we had the Tallahassee Wine Mixer, and the attendance was down. We didn't really know why. And you'd heard about these things, this thing that's going on, but you didn't really know. And then obviously when the ACC basketball tournament got canceled, you knew something was up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, let's face it. We're going to try and make money off those athletes as much as possible.
Yes,
and,
yes.
As you're well aware, right? And so you just knew something was coming and you didn't really know. And the interesting thing being in a college town and with the majority of our business in a college environment, when people don't have anything to do, they typically matriculate to bars. So therefore we didn't see the slam like Michigan State did and stuff like that. But we certainly saw a little bit of what's going on. And it's also spring break. So that was an interesting time as well. So our numbers are holding a little bit strong. And then all of a sudden, when we went, it was March 17th. It was St. Patrick's Day. You had to go 50% indoors, and we weren't even sure if we were. We saw a ton of food, and then what kind of license we're on, and all that. And we got word from DBPR that we're fine. So we went to 50% indoors, and 100%. I think you could do on the patio. And then on March 20th is when you went 100%. And by the way, in between all that, I believe our catering company had, within 48 hours, $275,000 worth of events canceled.
Wow.
Sheesh.
And a lot of those, by the way, you also run into some issues because they've put a deposit down. And so therefore, they might want their deposit money back or whatever the case may be. And you don't really have structural language. It's funny. Contracts, much like insurance, are typically reactive, right? I bet you, but we're going to get offered some pandemic insurance this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's funny you mention that, and I don't know all the specifics, but there's an FSU fan, part of the FSU Twitter community, who you may have interacted with at time to time, who is in the sunglass business. I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah, a guy up in Atlanta.
Yeah. He's got some sunglass stores, and he got hit because he had made some sales to corporate events where I guess there could be a corporate function or whatever, and they ordered 1,000 pair of sunglasses or whatever it is. So he gets a deposit. He makes the order for the merchandise. They cancel the event, and they want their deposit back.
Right.
Well, now he's already ordered all this stuff.
Correct.
But I guess there was nothing in the contract.
If he didn't have anything in the contract, right? And so, insurance-wise, there was nothing in your insurance about a pandemic, and it didn't fall as far as natural disaster.
Yeah.
So there was nothing that they can do from an insurance perspective. Everybody was trying, that was the big talk really early on was how do I get loss of business insurance? A lot of people were like, oh, you'll be fine, loss of business. No, it didn't cover it. This happened, by the way, with, to my knowledge, with Pulse. Remember the nightclub shooting down in Orlando?
Yeah.
After that, you started getting solicited for terrorism insurance.
Wow.
And so, for $350, you can have $1 million of coverage of terrorism insurance.
Wow.
Which we have because large events and large things, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So March 20th is when you went to takeout only, and that was effective. I believe that came down somewhere around noon, and as of 5 o'clock, you had to do that. So we just shut down. In between all that, we did a phone call with all management from all companies, and we went to 50% pay. That was the first step. Obviously, furlough all hourly employees, and then 50% pay for management. It was one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had. I think there's a thing, and I talk about it a lot. There's a parental aspect of owning a business.
Yeah.
You feel responsible at some way, right? And look, I'm not one of these people that uses the term family. It's a job. right?
If it makes you feel better, I'll call you.
Right. I'm not one of those people that go into that. We're a family here and all that, because I don't know. I also hate forced camaraderie. By the way, I guess that would be my shout out or whatever it was earlier.
Air it out.
Air it out. I hate forced camaraderie.
Yeah,
like I don't like Christmas parties. Like you tell, like company Christmas party, you have to go to that because that sounds miserable. Like and so we did that call. That was humbling. And then the next day you just pivoted straight into takeout only and all the operational problems that came with that. Particularly in our area, I don't have a parking lot. A little hard, right? And so therefore, just the logistical challenge that go with that. I think most people had patience. There were some of your daughter's customers that were certainly, you can't figure this out, and it's a very like, you should be happy to get my $60. I am, but at the same time, we did, and I said this at that blueprint meeting, we did our typical April is for Madison Social and Township is call it $900,000 in sales, somewhere around there. April's actually our biggest month.
Wow.
Because of graduation coming up, spring game, and the whole thing that's going on. Tallahassee weather's phenomenal. And then, most people, college students are and not that that's all of our business, but college students are just like us. When we go when we go on vacation, you probably aren't grocery shopping the week before a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're leaving Tallahassee for a long time, so therefore they're going out to dinner a lot more.
Yeah.
And so, but instead of $900,000, which helps you go through the summer, which is kind of brutal, we did 60. $60,000. So that is what, 8%?
7 or 8%.
7 or 8% of normal sales.
Wow.
So, and trust me, there was a lot of, oh my God, are we going to make it? Because this thing was never ending, right? It just felt as though that nobody had, and they didn't, which is fair. I don't expect anybody to have answers because we're doing something we haven't done in 100 years, right? It just felt like it was never going to end. And so May 4th is when you could open up 25%, 25% indoor, 100% patio. Then came all of the kind of the witch hunt people, which are, where they're whether they're media, some of them were media, some of them are just citizens with cell phones, and they're looking to determine whether or not you have 25% indoors and or you have 6 foot spacing on your patio. And the amount of people that never walked up, but I drove by and it looked busy. And so now we're going to ascertain that, everything's a problem. My favorite thing, as I told somebody, they didn't really appreciate it. I think before I took Twitter off my phone. They said something. I go, well, there's a reason why the sun looks like it's a lot closer and it's a bajillion miles away, right? So the same thing happens when you're standing across the street of a restaurant looking at a patio.
Your depth perception.
6 foot doesn't look like 6 foot, but it is.
Same thing would happen when they started letting fans at the basketball games at FSU. People would say, there's no way that person's 6 foot away. But from TV, you can't tell the depth perception.
Correct.
It looks like that person's like a half a foot away. And no, it's 6. If you walked around that arena, there was nobody sitting within 6 feet.
Yeah, man. Let me tell you, this is the guy who called the games. Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing, people were 6 feet. Ain't know what's annoying. I'm sitting over there and I'm like, man, I got to call a game with like a face shield on, like I'm a welding mechanic.
Yeah.
trying to do that. You know what I mean? It's so anyway, I tell people like, man, they should just figure this out. I'm like, anybody who says, I'm like, yeah, you've never let anything or people when you actually start having all these comments about people trying to figure things out during a pandemic. That's why I was like, you go to restaurants. That's why I had such respect for any restaurant, people out there trying to be able to pivot and do these things. So no one's ever had to do this in a world to where you're like, and let's be honest, everyone's like, we live in, this is a first world problem. Like in the sense of this, we live in this country. So we have never had to experience certain things. So like, we've been built a certain way. You know, it's a difference if you say you're living in a third world country.
Right.
You've been built there. We haven't lived there. And that's not saying it's bad. It's just like, this is reality. So everybody wants everyone
third world PC, or do you have to say underdeveloped? What do you say?
No, I say third world. I mean, I'm
gonna look to you. You would know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I say third world. We talk about communities.
Matt's about to get Twitter back on his phone.
Yeah, he's about to get Twitter back on his phone. Like just go
I'm
back.
good. I don't want to. No.
Yeah. But I guess let me ask you this quick question, because I do want to keep going, because I know that but I want to, because not only was this, but then everything with George Floyd.
Yeah.
And all that stuff happened. So now was a part where me and you begin to have some conversations, because the fact, so how did you, and again, I'm like, and I think I want to start, we'll talk about that in a second, mostly, how did you mentally, as a business owner and a leader, if you're willing to share this, like, how are you dealing with this? Like, mentally and emotionally, because again, it's like, not only are you thinking about, man, something you've built to have some success,
right?
But not only that, but man, you know, you have a wife, you have children. Not only that, man, you have employees you care for, you have partners that you care for. Not only, I mean, you know, like, how did you mentally, like, how was it for you?
It was pretty crappy. I mean, you know,
how was your mental health?
Yeah.
How's your mental health?
So I'm a very, that week, my wife, and so we were supposed to go to spring break. We were going to Mexico, and then, we made the decision to not go, because I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't think we're going to get back. Yeah. Right. So we made the decision not go, and we booked like the last house in Alligator Point for the week. And so I went down for like one day, and then I came back and I worked the entire week. And there were days that, and through that whole process, all the way through till May 4th, okay, that 45-day or so stretch, there were days that I think I felt every emotion possible, from sadness to madness to anger to, there was one time, you know, I remember there was one night, I just had a bunch of ideas. It was almost like being in the zone, like Steph Curry, just draining threes, except for I was having ideas that I think could impact our business and help us. So I went through a lot of different things. And then May 4th, when you opened, you feel like, okay, I'm starting to pull out of this a little bit, right? Okay. You know, we are, there's all sorts of little problems with the whole, like I said before, you know, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the wrong thing? Like, I made an early choice to not read up a bunch of COVID statistics and stuff like that, because that didn't help me cope, right? But also, kind of your point earlier of your, what's it called again? What's it called?
Air it out.
Air it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Your air it out is how in the world can I be expected to do all this stuff and be like an epidemiologist at the same time and know what's going on with COVID and understand all the things that are going on and the audience perception of all that, because it was a very polarizing thing. And so you're just trying to navigate it all as best as you can, and consume. I chose to not consume science, because I didn't want to be in a position where I'm making decisions that I don't know if they're right or wrong. And then I chose the side of, okay, audience perception. Where are the people's temperature on this topic?
Yeah.
And so that can be, I probably should have chose science, because at least that was a little bit more cut and dry, you know? And so I did all that. And then came the George Floyd situation. I didn't even really know what was going on with that at that point. Again, I was so consumed with everything. And then we had a situation where protests were coming through Tallahassee, and apparently the protests came by Madison Social. And Madison Social and Township, you know, I wasn't there. So let me keep that in mind. I can say what I was told, and I can say, you know, and basically what I was told was, it was the police had come by and gave a heads up that a protest is coming through. Whether or not we reacted to that in a way, I don't know. I don't know if they said. I think they said, if you might want to let customers know so they can go inside if they would like to. And so we did that. And it was also 97 degrees outside. It was June, right?
Yep.
Or, you know, and June 1st, June 2nd, whatever it was. And so people came inside already. A couple did stay out, but we had the door shut. and if you think about what had gone on that weekend when the protests in Tallahassee started, there was the situation downtown where the gentleman
drove his car,
which truck through
and I still don't know what happened there, right?
There's two sides to it.
Right,
Yeah.
two sides, right? You have, did he purposefully do that, or was he lost and didn't know where he was?
Yep.
Then what did he or she say to provoke the person punching?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there's a million different video angles, and
I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you this: the people in our organization were working during that. So the only thing that they have is a fight broke out at a protest. That's what they know, because they work all night and then they wake up to open up for brunch the next day. They don't have the time. There's people work. That's the thing. We all aren't sitting on Twitter and on social media all day researching stuff. Some people have things going on. I'm not saying some people have jobs. Some people have things going on that doesn't consume them. Right? And so people moved in. I'm pretty sure they moved in on their own accord. It wasn't like we ushered everybody in. But of course, what did Twitter turn it into? We ushered everybody in when the protests came by. While other companies passed out water, we chose to usher everybody in. Well, if we did that, even if we did that, I don't think we did, that's their responsibility. Their responsibility is to keep people safe and let them know what's going on. Hell, I've had a bar manager that had to break up a knife fight before. Like this stuff happens, and it was a heated time.
And that's not in your manual?
No.
You don't have the protest protocols in your working manual?
Nothing. And so we got, and it kind of just started with a tweet, and then a retweet, then a few more retweets. And next thing you know, this thing is starting to spiral, right? And that's when you and I did a phone conversation, because I said, this is what's going on. And then we had a conversation that, it was late night. I think at like 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. I was on a, I was on a vacation. So we had decided to go up to a lake house with some friends. And so I did that. And again, because everything going on, I drove the day. I just didn't know. Like I wasn't like, and so you and I had a conversation, and you brought to my attention that there were some people that you knew that our brands have benefited on some level from Black athletes. Whether that is we made a shirt or a pint glass or whatever the case may be, or maybe just ancillary because
Doak Campbell,
you were right there, and obviously, and that's always where I sit on the whole Doak Campbell issue. By the way, if the people that built that stadium to what it is don't want it named Doak Campbell, then don't do it. Right. But if the people, if they don't care, then don't care. Right. So I don't really have a dog in that fight. Like I don't really, whatever you think, you built it. I didn't build it. I didn't throw a touchdown in the middle of Doak Campbell Stadium. So, you and I did that call, and that was the part that resonated with me the most, was that there's people out there that think that that we are having a non-character defining moment. And so I slept on it. I think you even told me to do that. And I woke up and I was like, we're just going to write something, and I viewed it as the approach of, I'm a person of action. I'm not a person of just, by the way, I also had no idea it was Black Tile Day on Instagram. No clue. Didn't know Blackout Tuesday was going to be a thing. So, in hindsight, wish I would have known that, because what we were doing at that point in time as a nation, I think a lot of people were posting up an image, and they were acknowledging that there's some problems here. Some believe it's more problems than the others, but there's some issues here. And let's just acknowledge that there's some problems and listen, right? apparently I was a little bit down the road from that because I was already at, all right, what, reflectively, we've had people come to us before and say, FAMU, we don't do enough for the FAMU community. I pay rent to the Florida State Boosters. I'm a Knoll grad. I look at Doak Campbell Stadium. I don't think about TCC. I don't think about anything but FSU because that's my audience and that's where I'm at. And so I think our post said something along the lines of, I think we can do better with some things from a FAMU perspective. Also, it just another thing, it gets a little rough is if we do blue and green things, that's Miami colors. And so trust me, I've done stuff and I get attacked. I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's FAMU too, by the way. Yeah. And so that shouldn't get in the way. I'm just giving an example. Some things that come back at you sometimes. And then I think the other thing I said is we need to look at our policies. Yep. And we did that 100%. Yeah. That is one thing we immediately looked at. We went straight to and that actually came from some things that I've heard from staff that we need to get better at. And I went to the labor attorney, and in the restaurant industry, in the bar industry, your employee handbook and the things you're most worried about is typically sexual harassment. Yeah. Not discrimination. Yeah. And so we beefed up that part of our employee handbook. And so and so it was, so I went into action mode and, apparently that turned into, words getting mixed up that, I'm saying that this is a FAMU problem. I never said that, that wasn't something that, and then I also realized that it's such we had internally, some people weren't that happy with what we posted. And so the whole, how we do things, kind of changed a little bit. And so, I don't know. I think if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it 90% the same way. There might be some things that I do differently. I will say, I will say there's a couple things. One of the comments that people came back with was Black Lives Matter. Like say Black Lives Matter. And you didn't say that. As a 43-year-old white male, I grew up in the generation where you didn't call black people black. Yeah. We were specifically told to use the term African American. Yeah. That was
very clear.
Erased in the 90s, right? So I am now. I wasn't even comfortable with the word black because that wasn't what I was told growing up to do to be respectful. Yeah. And then I also, again, and this could be my own naivety, I don't know. I also didn't know if white people were welcome in the conversation of Black Lives Matter. It seemed like a few years ago we weren't, and that was and that all surfaced after Missouri, right? Yep. And it seemed like we weren't. And so, therefore, another thing, I just didn't know that was something that,
And I think, and I know that, and I, doing that process, I'll never forget because it's like, you're dealing with the pandemic and then you're dealing with all this stuff, you, like you said, you're 9. So I tell people it's like, so part of it was like, when I talked to you, I'll never forget this because it was like, it's always about solving problems. It's about, okay, hey, how are you actually going to help someone get somewhere? And the reality, I always tell people all the time, when I talk to you about it, I said, this is kind of the thoughts. Here's what I see, And you were like, man, we were going back and forth, just talking through it. You slept on it the next day. I didn't provoke it. I said, cause I told you, I'll never forget, like, hey, man, I'm gonna be your friend regardless. So whatever you do, I'm gonna be your friend. And on your own, you're like, hey, I'm gonna put this out there, And then you took a step again. I thought, and again, I'll never forget, like, hey, read this over for me. I'm like, no, you're good. And send it because I knew this. You weren't going to hit every person, but I always try to tell people, I look at it now and people say, well, there should be more. I can't believe, you're just posting like this thing of, even like what you just said earlier, man, Juneteenth, make black owned businesses. Well, you guys have a huge reach. That's a huge reach that you have on Twitter. That means, again, that means a lot for people. Hey, black owned business, man, we're doing this not just as something, but man, this is actually going to that can mean something, but that's a step. And I think so many times in this conversation, and I know we can move from here. So a lot of times in this conversation, everybody wants everyone to take this one jump and take these huge jumps in, when it's like, man, no. People are starting to take steps. I mean, you've had more and more conversations since then about taking jumps and steps. And I think that's, again, goes back to the original thing. In all of this stuff, I just have come to a place, most people do not want to solve problems. What they want to do is just constantly, honestly, like, they're not trying to help people get better. They just want to keep pushing and then expect people to get better on their own. I'm like, well, how do you expect that? That's why I had the conversation. Well, if I had somebody say that, well, man, why'd you spend that time? He should know this stuff and learn this stuff. I'm like, why would he? Why would he? Just like, and so I think it's just, but I want to say this, I give you a lot of credit for the fact of like, man, listen, constantly keep moving forward. And so I know it's a lot, and I appreciate the steps and stuff it took to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Why would I man, of all the things I got going on in my life, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I don't care. That just means like a lot of things. I just don't have the time.
Well, I think what happened in that moment in time, going back to last summer, I think happened to a lot of white people, myself included, is I think a lot of us, certainly myself, felt like, okay, if I'm not racist, if I'm not prejudiced, if I'm not doing anything wrong, then I'm good. And I think what a lot of us learned during that time is that's not enough. And I think like you're being proactive now with the Juneteenth, looking for ways. And what happened at that point in time was, like you said, there was a time where a lot of times white people didn't feel like participating in the conversation because didn't really know how to and how it applied. And am I going to say the wrong thing? And so, but then it gets to that moment where it's like, okay, it's not enough to just stand by and say, I'm not the problem. Are you actually doing anything? But what's unfair is it's like the rules of engagement kind of changed like right then at that time. And then people are like holding it against businesses and for not doing anything more when that wasn't
the thing.
That's not.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time now that working, because honestly, working in this space, what it sparked was this. Because honestly, what's interesting is that, when me and, Matt started talking through this stuff, it sparked this whole thing for me. I'm like, no. I mean, like, I just am like, I've built diverse space. I know how to build spaces like this. So it sparked this whole thing in me that now has led to a lot of the work I'm doing in corporate world with DEI work. But one of the things I found is what you're saying, man, like 2020 was all about power. Well, the rules of engagement changes because now, before it was just like, okay, hey, come into the competition. Now what you saw demanding, and because of the rise of the internet, all this stuff is black people demanding, saying, no. Like, it's power. It's because power changes structures and systems, right? Like, again, though, like the whole Blackout Tuesday thing, I'm like, all right, great. People did this in solidarity, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I care more now about, man, that's great you did that. But how are you actually treating like your, those who are bigger corporations? How you put Black Lives Matter, but how are you treating your factory workers who mainly may be black and brown people? Are you empowering? Is there a track for them to actually move up in your organization? Right. That's what I care about. I care now more about this. So it's like, oh, what are we doing in order in this whole situation? So like to actually see people uplift, and that's where the rules change, because I think before it was like, man, okay, we want to hear and whatever. I mean, there's something that have people telling you guys, like, so I have people telling white people, man, this is none of your, but don't get involved in this. You should know it. And then some people are like, why are you more involved? And you're just like, I'm like, dude, listen, my biggest thing is this: as long as people are trying to take those steps forward, I'm willing to have room, you know what I'm saying, to be able to do that. And so I think, and so it was just a really interesting time. Man.
Yeah, I think where we're at, I mean, you kind of, another thing from a business perspective is, man, everybody treats every business the same. I'm not Amazon. Mm-hmm. You talk about people of color that being able to go and advance in an organization.
Yep.
To my knowledge, I don't think we have that problem. We advance whoever's the most qualified candidate, and I hope we do, and I hope we look at things like that. And in fact, I know we do from a leadership standpoint. We know we do. We don't. But I will say this: the question becomes now hiring. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that business owners are grappling with on a very high on a level is we're not Amazon and Google and Microsoft with teams of recruiters that can specifically make a relationship with an HBCU if that's one of your goals, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is to hire top black talent, right? I would think you would want to have a strong relationship with HBCUs.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. I don't have time. We don't have that arm of what we do. I don't even have an HR person. So, we take what comes at us from Indeed or Monster.com or whatever it is, and then we're trying to make a determination. Now, you could make an argument we all need to do a better effort of being proactive. I can agree with that. But again, I don't have the time and the resources necessarily to – I'm not making recruiting the last recruiting trip I went on was last week to Kaiser because that's where I need culinary talent.
Yeah.
And that I think that's where the lumping that's starting to happen is that the small and medium-sized businesses, we don't know what to do, right? Because we don't have that in our organization. And I'm not saying that's right, but also I don't know if we can afford to pay for a recruiter.
Well, the point Adrian made at the beginning about thin solutions to thick problems. Phrased it. In the newspaper business, it's a huge problem, lack of diversity in media. And when I was at the local newspaper, and I was just talking to somebody who's there still, and they were telling me that they put out an offer to a young black reporter and offered him what they offer. And USA Today came in and offered that same person almost double what they're offering. I mean, this is a kid that's maybe 2 years out of college, and the Tallahassee Democrat, they can't offer that. They don't have that. So but nobody wants, I'm not saying that's an excuse, but I'm just saying there's more to it than just, it's not just choice.
Correct.
And maybe there's long-term solutions
and
that need to be addressed.
And that's probably the biggest thing is like, some of the work that we do that, actually, that Bree helps us work in is like incorporate. That's the issue right now. Right now, it is literally I tell people right now in corporate America, in workforce, if you are a person of color, especially a black person of color, who, have certain, who's good at what you do, whatever. You can write your ticket because, people are looking for, it goes back to a bigger issue. They're looking for diverse talent. They're looking to kind of go, some people are doing this because they know it's important. Some people, I'm not going to say everybody's not being genuine but sometimes people have check boxes, they're doing whatever. But the problem goes back to what you said. The thing that's happened, it's a much bigger problem, which goes back to the idea of like development. So I think about,
we're not going to fix this in the short term.
No, you're not. No. So I think about with your industry and what you're doing. So again, me and you always talk like, man, having culinary talent is always the issue, right? So for me, my mind always instantly goes to, okay, how do you actually solve that problem? So I'll start solving, okay, well, hey, what about you start at this level? You start at the high school level and you start really like truly trying to figure a way within certain to really develop, because most people can't really see that, especially in the age, where education is becoming, I think now it's like 25% or so. It's some crazy amount of number, like 1 in 3 or whatever actually go to college now, people in general. Yeah. So it's still like, and with prices rising, it's like, okay, well then how are we actually solving solutions for real? Because there are going to be a lot of jobs where, man, like right now, people are trying to hire. They want people there, but then how do you get that talent? So it starts like, man, you start there, you work your way up, but it's being proactive in that. And that's where I'm thinking is going to be the issue is like your big companies, your big organizations, USA Today, on and on, going to be able to hire people because they got more money. The question then becomes, then there's going to be the shortage, and what's going to happen? People are going to be like, okay, well, what else can we do? Whatever. But it's like, no. It starts here, and it's an intentionality behind it as you build. And so like we do that right now. Some of our clients they're Fortune 500, but when you start talking about those Fortune 10s and, Fortune 100, you're talking about, man, like trying to go up against an Apple, or you're trying to go against, I'm like, dude, that's hard because at the end of the day, it's Apple. Right. You know what I'm saying? You got like you got just a regular kind of, let's say you're just a kind of a home goods company or something like that. It's like, well, that sounds like super sexy. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you work at Apple or, work it, whatever, It's like, so I think it's just, it's a robust, kind of situation. And so, but I think that's a really interesting conversation, Matt, because I think of where you've been at is like, man, you've had to hit it from, it's been multiple sides, you know what I'm saying? And so, but you got something? Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about how, cause we started New Rules Collective through all of this, and how it actually started was you coming up with something for common ground for you guys. And then we just kind of swirled off of that. So I was just thinking about how how crazy that is.
Yeah.
But also, because obviously you had to make a ton of changes to everything that you do for your businesses over 2020. So whether that be because of COVID, whether that be because of everything that was happening with race. So what are things that kind of stuck with you?
The biggest thing for our industry, the biggest thing that is going to come out of this is QR codes. I got to be honest. And that serves.
We're not getting menus back.
That serves two purposes. Number one, printing costs are outrageous, and so therefore, being able now that everybody's comfortable with the technology and realizing that, and I didn't even realize this. I was a QR code adopter when they came out in 2010, 2020, but you had to have a QR code reader, a separate app. I'm like, this is stupid. Why wouldn't I just type this into my browser type of thing, right? And I think all of us were like that. And then the phone evolved to read QR codes, and none of us knew that, right? Until now this. And so that adoption and how that affects the industry is two ways. Number one is is printing. That makes 100% right sense. The second, price elasticity. I can now update digitally pricing based upon what I'm seeing on the cost side. So when Super Bowl time typically is a time when chicken wings go up.
Man, that's something I learned during the pandemic. I never knew that. I never knew during a friend of ours.
Man, we had the great chicken wing shortage. You know what I'm saying?
A friend of mine owns another restaurant in town who sells a lot of chicken wings.
Oh, and they're really high right now. They're still high.
But if your price is on a menu, you can't change it.
You can't change it. Yeah. And so therefore, being able to digitally go in and change pricing is pretty effective to keep your costs in line. And so I think that's one of the big things that's going to stick. A lot of people talk to you about to-go alcohol in our industry. I mean, maybe on game days, I'll see what that's like. But to be honest, I haven't really seen a huge game day problem with people walking around with booze.
They don't need you for that.
They don't really need me for that. Exactly. Now, we're going to make it a little easier for you, right, than having to hide it in your wife's purse or whatever it is that you do now. But that is 1% of 1% of sales. Like, it really is not a big motivating factor.
I've seen a couple places that haven't gone back to opening their dining rooms. What would be the thought process behind that?
I would think you can cut down your labor. So you can control it a lot more. It's a lot easier model. And then I think they do have problems getting, I will say this, we talked about labor. I don't see right now, I'm not yes. Are there people that are gaming the system, sitting down, or were, yes, 100%. But if you're a business owner and you're worried about that, do you really want that damn person in your organization?
Dude, Matt talking about, because it's like the whole thing. It's like, that's the one thing that bothers me when, like, you're right. It's like, one, people who complain about this, I'm like, it's such a loser's mentality, because you're like, one, you don't want those type of people in there. Two, it's like, it's always just complaining. But it's always funny. The same people who are complaining are always the same people who like talk about like, oh man, this generation come behind. They're snowflakes and they're soft. I'm like, you're soft. Like, why are you always complaining? Just solve the problem.
I used to always say the three human truths, right? Death, taxes. The third is that every generation feels like the generation behind them sucks.
Yeah. Dude, right? we romanticize like our growing up. You remember when we had this? I'm like, had what? I'm like, we're not like this. Like, I don't know what I would, if I had social media growing up, I was already a psycho. I'm like, that would have made it worse.
Atari came out and we were all in my buddy's living room because he had Atari.
100%. Yeah. I mean, we're the video game generation, right?
Yes. And,
but in our memories, we were never inside. We were always outside.
We were always outside. I'm like,
these kids don't go outside anymore. I don't think I did much either.
When it was 95.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, are you kidding me? Mike Tyson's Punch-Out came out, and I was like, you can find me. I'm trying to be Sandman. Like, you know what I'm saying?
You had three. You had Atari, Sega Genesis. You had them all.
Nintendo. Right? You had Sega Genesis. Yeah, there was that whole thing. But I agree. It's like, but I want to go to this because I think that was a really good, you were talking about this idea of like, people not, I understand people not going back. I guess I would ask another question would be for you, and because you always create, the one thing I love about you is like you'll pivot, and like a lot of your creativity comes out of like solving problems, right? Like I think a lot of it just comes like very practical solutions driven things. What is something that you would say, man, through the pandemic, you were like, dude, us going to this kind of creation or whatever, man, like this is something that was really, really good for us. Is going to be something that's going to be in the future. Is there something?
100%. It was selling challenge shirts. So if you're not familiar, we do a monthly challenge where we theme it per per drink or spirit. We have a design. This is what we're known for. The bajillion shirts that you see when you walk around Tallahassee and abroad. We had never ever sold a previous challenge shirt. So once it's done, it's done. And that decision, which I guess now I can look back on it as genius. I certainly didn't feel like it had to. It was just, well, we're not going to do that. Allowed us to have pent up demand. So while everybody else was selling gift cards, that's going to screw you 9 months down the road when they use them. We got to fulfill them. We pivoted to sell our shirts. We did somewhere in the ballpark of $400,000 in just T-shirt sales. Wow. And online sales of what we did. Wow. So, we were throwing everything. So that was a big one. Some of the things that we developed were some new stuff that we developed were huge. I'm grateful for FSU turning an eye maybe to some of the things that we created and just allowing us to go because I was not worried about licensing and all those things. Yeah. I was just trying to figure out life. Yeah. And we have a new formal relationship now, so that's good. So, they came back and they said, "All right, it's time to rein it in a little bit." And I'm like, "That's fair. That's fair. That's a little egregious." So that was huge, and so that's something we kept up with. And so now our audience outside, and it's not as big as what it was certainly during the pandemic, but can buy stuff that we do in store online. And so that's a nice little revenue source that we never had, but that was huge. That was absolutely massive. And then, and we did a lot of collaborations, whether it was with Ology, where you buy a beer and get a pizza. We did stuff with Proof. We did, I even sold cause I know David Ross. And so, Rossi did a dinner, a dinner on Zoom with like 10 people for me to help raise a little bit of money. It's funny. He goes, "What's the charity for this?" And I go, "Me. What are you talking about? What's the charity? Me right now." I go, "You forget I'm in this." He's like, "Yeah, that's fair." Yeah. And so we did a lot of different things that we tried to figure out and using the access that we have to certain things, we were able to create some pretty special moments. One fun one that we did, I don't know if I'll ever do it again because, God, it was a nightmare to figure out. We did the Tipsy Truck with Tally Mac Shack. Mm-hmm. And so while he drove, you would get Mac from him and we were the booze component of that. And so trying to figure out how to deliver all that, we would hit like Southwood or something like that. And then we would have to map it all out. And the damn mapping stuff would say it would take 2 hours. It took 4, and these poor people are on their lawn waiting for you to pull up with their food.
Was there ever a point where you guys thought, man, we may not get out of this?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there was, I think, you felt real, yes, 100% in March, right? In April. Then you start pulling out of it. And then really COVID hit Tallahassee in late June.
Right.
And so then you just felt like you took 7 steps back in June. And the mask mandate, man, that's a whole other bag, right? Yeah. Where I stood on mask and I still stand on mask was, I don't know if they work. I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and debate. I know there's studies that say yes masks and there's studies that say no masks, and I have no idea. I think they're a great symbol to remind people that something's going on and you might not want to sit 3 foot away from each other or whatever the case may be, right? So I thought there was a needed symbol at that time. What I don't appreciate is how we did a county mask mandate with no enforcement except on the businesses that had to enforce. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Now, the county says, we didn't ask you to enforce. Very true. But the court of public opinion was, you have to be the enforcer.
And you're violating it if you don't.
Correct. Yeah. And that was tough. That was extremely tough. Trying to keep, and that's where you started. Not only are you now not making any money, right, from a revenue perspective, your costs are going up. The gloves went from $40 a box to $140 a box overnight. Wow. Labor. Now you got labor problems because you have to hire people to just specifically make sure you stay in your seat. You have your mask on when you're going to the bathroom, everything else. And it just felt as though, and then all of a sudden, and then, here it is, you get through all that and you're starting to feel better again. And then $15 minimum wage comes through, voted on. It's like, it just felt like every 2 or 3 months, here comes another thing to solve. Here comes another thing to solve. Here comes another thing to solve. And I know that's a totally different issue, but I mean, again, I don't know one business owner that wants to sit around and make sure people live in poverty. Mm-hmm. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think where we struggle is whose problem is to solve this, because I don't know if more money is the solvent.
Yeah, and that's the question I do, and I think it's probably the last thing to say because I know it's a big thing right now. So, as a small business owner, and again, if you're willing to speak to it, is the fact of where do you land on that when it comes to because it overwhelmingly passed in the state of Florida the idea of the $15 minimum wage. Yeah. Kind of a small business owner, where do you stand on that and the perspective? Because again, for me, I have my perspective of it as a business owner, but I don't I don't have to walk as much as you do in the hourly type of thing. I don't have to walk in that as much. So for me, I have a perspective on it, but as somebody who doesn't.
How would restaurants be affected by that? Because restaurants traditionally have been exempt from minimum wage, right?
So I'll answer both of those. Yeah. So you just hit on probably my biggest pet peeve. I guess I'm sounding off again or whatever.
Airing it out.
I'm airing it out. Yeah, I think I rebranded it for you. Sounding off. I apologize.
We had a branding problem.
I apologize.
All you do is come up with solutions.
I need to write this down. I need to air it out. I think we have a lot of people making decisions for businesses that haven't worked an hourly job in quite a long time. Or have not managed hourly employees for quite a long time. And I think that's a problem. Okay. Because I think what you'll find is that, like I said, I'm not 100% convinced that just giving somebody $15 an hour, all of a sudden their problems are solved. I don't even know if it's $17. I don't know if it's $20. I think there's still a root cause of whatever financial problems that you have.
Yeah.
You haven't, unfortunately, you were not raised in a way or taught to be able to manage money. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're just going to give you more money to keep making bad mistakes.
Yeah. But here's the question this is my pushback though. My pushback would be, though I agree with that, because we talk about these multiple layers, is that I do think sometimes people didn't learn, didn't grow up with it, didn't understand how to manage it, whatever it may be. Right. But now you see it in your industry, like we were talking earlier, prices rise, right? And a lot of different things. So the cost of living for people is up. So I agree with you where people they're going to mismanage it, right? But where does it start from the fact of people actually having a base to be able to say, okay, because here's what I would say. This is where I would side with the fact that do I believe in $15 minimum? I do, but I also would say this too. But also from a government standpoint too, my issue out with the government is I'm like, okay, if business owners are stepping up and you're going to mandate what they have to do, my question becomes for the federal government, all right, then what are you going to do in order to so we can just get people to a base level of being able to, move forward. We're not talking about people getting rich, but we're talking about people having a step forward to give an opportunity, because many people can squander their own opportunity, but it's man, at least give them a thing. My thing is, okay, government, what then are you doing to actually then step in with these business owners to actually not just, okay, it's only on you to do this, but hey, if it's 50, but what else are they going to do in programs that really can help people actually be able to get ahead? And yes, but I think because my biggest thing, everybody always goes to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, but
right?
a guy working $15 an hour, or let's say they're working 12 an hour now with 3 kids, and they're going to $15 an hour with 3 kids, still has 3 kids.
Absolutely.
Still has the problem. Childcare is still not affordable for that person, whether or not I give them 12 or 15. Now the only thing that we've done is taken money out of the person who took the risks, and I didn't force you to take that job. It's a free market.
Yeah.
You chose to apply for a job that advertised for whatever it advertised. And I don't even know. I don't think we start people at $15 an hour quite yet. But I mean, we're not egregious.
Yeah.
You know? And I think the restaurant industry is notorious for, yes, they will start you like a dishwasher at $9 or $10 an hour. But within a week, if you prove yourself, you're moving up. Mm-hmm. You're moving up. And we're going to add more skill set to you. We're going to try and build you. And then we just need you to show up.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's my thing is like, it's a free market.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
and I can't solve your childcare problems because it's $900 a month for you to put your kid in daycare to have a job.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
And I would agree. And that's the thing too. I would agree with that there is, again, it's a thick problem. So now, okay, are you dealing with childcare? Are you dealing with, there's all these other things that come with it. So it's like, okay, but you got to start, I think, somewhere and then going, because I agree with you when you start this thing, like, hey, and I agree with that statement, man, it's a free market. People make these choices. But sometimes you think about it too, it goes back to, it is a deeper problem because now it's this, it's like, okay, it's great. But it's like, okay, well, if you grew up where for whatever reason, you know, let's say mom's working 2 jobs, you had no one at home. They're not like our kids, right? Where they're going to come home. They got every bit of access, right? Tutor. I mean, whatever they're going to get. So the expectation versus these guys who don't really have this opportunity.
Cleanliness.
Skills, yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. Or have this opportunity or skill set to be able to do these things. It's one of those situations where I tell people, okay, as a business owner, I'm for profit. I am for a free market, but I also realize too, I have to be like, for human beings to actually figure out how do we actually help? What part can I play? Because I feel like I'm not Superman, right? I'm not Bruce Wayne. I'm not going to save the world, but I do know, like, hey, I have a part. What part can I play to at least do my part? Because I agree with you, Matt, it's deeper than that.
I don't disagree with that. I think you'll become, and I don't know if you have.
Yeah.
You would be slightly more jaded after you get sued.
Oh yeah, I'm there right now. But yeah.
It makes you get a little bit more jaded on when people people take advantage. 100%. And that's the old professor thing, right? I've always said, like, students, do you really think your professor doesn't care about you? Do you really think? No, they got screwed over so many times that they finally just go to the syllabus and say, this is a black and white contract and this is what it is.
Well, one challenge, I think the problem, I think a lot of times what we do is, and again, going back to Adrian's point, which was good about the thin solutions, is we look at the minimum wage as like, that's going to solve everybody's problems. Like, it's not going to solve everybody's problems. No. And the reality is, and my big issue with it, and we can wrap it up here, but $15 an hour, first of all, nobody's saying that has to be their wage for eternity. It's not like that has to be that's, you know, to your point before, if somebody does well, you're going to reward them because you want to keep them so that they don't go across town to somebody else. But I also look at somebody like my daughter who had no work experience when she went to work. You were going to give her first job, which I was appreciative of. She ended up getting at a fast food place. I don't know that she's worth $15 an hour. In fact, I'm pretty sure she's not worth $15 an hour. Yeah. But, you know, but other people who, you know, have a family to support, that's a totally different situation, and they have different challenges, and you're not going to solve by changing the minimum wage to any number. It's not going to fix everybody's problem.
Well, and I think the issue, it's also a problem because it's state mandated and it's state run. I think we can all agree that Leon County is a little bit different than Dade.
Right.
And certainly Jackson County and Liberty County are different than Leon County. Yeah. And so my thing, because I sat in one of these meetings and just because I was like, how can we make employees' lives better? Yep. Right. You know? And I sat there and I said, I don't even know. We throw this term poverty around. Do you know what the poverty rate in Tallahassee is? In Leon County?
I know in certain areas it's terrible.
Right, but like what is considered overall poverty? Does anybody know here? I didn't know, but we throw the term around. I asked. It's $19,800 a year, somewhere around there, about $20,000. Mm-hmm. It's $10 an hour for a 40-hour-a-week job. So why don't we all just get to agree that we're not going to pay everybody below poverty? Mm-hmm. That would be the first step. That sounds good. Yeah. Because I don't think there's one employer that would disagree. I don't want anybody in our community living below poverty line.
See, here, I would, and again, this is a longer
$41,000 family, by the way, is the
thing. But see, I would do, and again, this is one of those situations where I think, well, this is probably bringing you back on, because this is a really, really important conversation, because I really believe this. I think so many times, Matt, and I know I do this, I think others do this, we actually people think many times like we do. Like, for example, you're like,
that's an old saying.
Because you saying just now, you're just like, well, I don't think people do. I'm like, no, it's not true. Because here's what happens. Especially if it starts to say like, okay, hey, you're going to have to, as a business owner, you're going to have to take less to be able to, you're going to have to take less, or like, like your profits you make in order for people not to live in poverty. Like, I like the way you said that, because here's the thing. Honestly, branding it that way, the branding issue, right? That makes it better, because now people like this. So we all do minimum wage. We say, hey, we're going to do this because we're not going to have any employee live below the poverty line. Right. Now, if you decide to say, I'm fighting against that, then you're just a douche. Like, you know what I'm saying? Versus like you're just a douche. Like, you know what I mean? But some people are that way. They're like, well, yeah, they say that until literally you have to do it. Or like them say, like, I'm just going to say, you talk about big corporations. This is like, I should have said this on here now. Like, I'm old, like, you look at like Amazon and stuff like that. Like, they'll place like Black Lives Matter and do stuff like that. But then when you actually look at how they treat their like they're like actual like workers, like that are black and brown, they're awful. Like, it's freaking awful. And you're like, that's cool. And dude made so much money. And again, I believe in capitalism, but this is what we saw in COVID was a prime example. When you don't allow capitalism to be checked, just like, listen, I don't believe in socialism at all, because that don't work either. Right. But both of them unchecked leads to the exploiting of people. And that's where, for me,
Adrian's talking about like those meat processing plants and things like that. You start hearing those stories out of those.
If you're one of those crazy capitalists that believe that we don't have socialism going on, you're insane. Every healthcare program for a company is socialism. If us four are on my healthcare program, you're hurting us. Because you are a young female that might get pregnant, and we're not helping. All three of us aren't helping. I'll look at all of us. All three of us aren't helping you, right? Because we're all fat old dudes, right? And so the rate is set based upon the group, right, of who you work with. Think how wild that is, right? Yeah. That if we all work together and you get pregnant, my rate goes up. What?
Or if you have a heart attack.
Right, or if I have a heart attack. That's wild.
Yeah.
That we live in this, there's, to your point, there's so many different little problems and idiosyncrasies that go on. And I can't begin. And also I think we could all agree when you say the word, that should be that's a floor, right? Like minimum wage is the floor. Poverty to me should be the floor, because I don't think you can make 19.8 in Tallahassee. I don't know. Where do you got to have a roommate, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? 100%. Like, I know plenty of people that
I don't even know you do all,
Yeah, you can't, that's what I'm saying. And I think that's what people like our generation be like, oh man, we think about 15 an hour. We think of 15 an hour. Honestly, we don't mean to go back to the past. You look at 15 an hour, you're like, man, that's crazy. 15 an hour. Yeah. Man, somebody's making 15 an hour like back in the day. We're going, that person's got a degree, right? If you make 15, now we're saying 15 an hour is like, it's like 15 an hour kind of is like the new, or like, it's like the new, like what was $7.50. I mean, maybe it's not as high, but it's like, it's kind of like, because things have just gone up, like costs go up, things go up. I mean, we talk about one of the greatest ways you build wealth in our country, or one of the greatest ways you kind of get like generational wealth is owning a home. Like, home prices are through the roof. Like, you think about how can someone making, minimum wage right now, even remotely, even if they're the most fiscally responsible person ever, begin to do that? And I'm not saying that everybody's going to do it, but what we cannot do anymore is make decisions based off of like, well, we see people, that's what we tend to do. We find like people who exploit the system. Right. And then we blame the people. Well, see, that's 100%. Why we don't do it. All these welfare moms. I'm like, dude, when you actually go in there and look at hard data of that, it is so far less. It is such a minuscule thing, but it's just that thing we prop up, just like we prop up on the others. Just like people prop up on the other side, whatever thing you think a conservative does. And it's like, no, that's a minimal, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, we react to that. And that's the thing.
Right. Because you only hear about the fringe 15%.
Yeah.
Right. The bell curve. You only hear about the old early adopters and, and the laggards, but basically those fringe 15%, right? The people that rush the Capitol,
Yep.
on January 6th, or the people that say all police suck.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we lead with. And then we try and say, if you're fringe left or fringe right, or, you're those things. And it's just not right.
Well, and I had the worst part of 2020 to me was just the way and I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours about this. We shouldn't, but the way everybody had to judge each other. And like you talked about the mask police, the civilians who would walk by your restaurant and judge whether or not you guys were following the guidelines. Right. You had the people, if you go into Publix, first it was you got judged if you wore a mask, then you got judged if you didn't wear a mask, then you got judged, and it's like everybody, and then the businesses that took PPP money, they got judged, and the people who, it's just everybody wants to just point the finger at everybody else and tell them they're bad or they're wrong.
And instead of pointing, and Bree will tell you this, when we work in the world we're in right now, I tell every organization and company we work for, because as soon as I hire a child, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, depending on where you sit now. So I have clients who are literally they politically sit right. I got clients who sit politically left. The thing I constantly have to remind people of, and this has kind of been that, I'm like, everybody wants to change the world. Nobody wants to change the world around them. So I tell all of our clients, because as soon as they come in and they feel like I say something about, hey, we need to start looking, these are the numbers. They're not great. How do we do this? Well, I feel like this is a progressive left push. I'm like, well, progressive left had nothing to do with these numbers of this. But what I can say is okay, but then it becomes all this stuff. I'm like, no. Let's not think about the world. What world do we want to see in here? Because this is the world we can control. This organization we can control. So the world we want to see out there, let's make it right here. And I think if people would start doing that, no matter where you sit, if you have what world the world you see out there, what do you want to see? And the thing you have power and control over, then start building it. But what we tend to do is allow the outside pressures. We allow being on social, being on Twitter, to push so much of our anxiety to then now won't let us just deal with that instead of going back to, I think, real problem solvers, those who make impact, will say, no, this is the world I have, and I'm going to make this world like the world I actually want to see. And I think if you can do that, you can start making change. I think organizations can do that.
And respect the progress that has been made.
Yes, that's it.
And that's the other thing is I think that's the most frustrating part for people a lot of times is that no progress has ever been made. Yeah. We've made a ton of progress. And I'm quoting Bill Maher because I saw a clip of him at 8 minutes recently, and he's like, yes, do we need more to do? But he gave a statistic that something like the last time they polled people about interracial relationships was 2013. 87% of the respondents were in. When you and I were growing up,
it was less than that.
It was like, oh my God, why does this movie have a black guy with a white girl, right?
Yeah.
We've made a lot of progress, and just acknowledge that.
Yeah, but and it's both, and I would agree with you. Yeah. And it's let's go back to this thing. When both things I tell Breeze all the time, two things can be equally true. We're talking about Juneteenth. It's man, I'm going to celebrate Juneteenth and be man, if it got passed and it's going to be a national holiday, man, I want to celebrate that. And that's an incredible thing. And I celebrate it because now what you're actually doing is saying Black history is American history. Because before it was left out. You know what I'm saying? Back
100%.
So that's what I'm saying. But now on the other side, I can also say too, man, let's celebrate that and enjoy it. But also say, man, but also in the same breath, man, we still have ways to go.
Right.
And both things can be equally true. But it's what you're saying. Let's celebrate when there is movement. When there is something that was, okay, look, let's celebrate that. And you don't rest in that, or you don't listen. I always tell people, if you're really about solving problems, and you're really about seeing people move and that's really making an impact, then what good does it do to tell someone, let's say someone took one step. Someone white took one step toward this idea, to tell them, well, man, that's just the bare minimum. About time you got involved. You're like, what do you think they're going to do? Just like somebody tells me that. All of a sudden, if you start going to, you want to start getting in shape, you work out, and you just say, hey, man, I'm just going to start, I'm going to start drinking, just water more, well, man, that's the bare minimum. You're never going to, you're like, okay, then what, if you're constantly hearing it, you're like, all right, well, forget it. I'm just going to keep drinking, whatever. Right.
Yep.
So it's all about that. So anyway, all that being said, Matt, we really appreciate it, man. We appreciate the time. And again, the one thing, guys, I want you to know, listening to the pod, is that that's what we do. We come in here, we have a set of ideas and things that we go around, but it's one of those things where we let the conversation go where it is, because it's all about authentic conversation. And so, Matt, we appreciate the time, and we appreciate you actually being in our city. I mean, again, one of the things I say, man, 300 employees that are, Tallahassee based, providing jobs in our city. So, we talk about celebrating some things, man, you're providing jobs, for a city where many times, man, people take their talents and they leave here and they don't do that. And so you actually are you guys are a local, we're a company that actually are providing jobs in this city versus many times people in this city, man, their jobs come from outside. So you're actually doing the work to keep people here. And man, we really appreciate you. All the work
on that note, one last question.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, people started tipping better, I think.
Yes.
Are they still tipping better, or are they going back?
Nope, pretty good.
Okay.
Everything's pretty good.
Keep
They're tipping well.
There we go. I'll tell you what, man. Every time I go over to the coffee shops and things like that, they give you a little tip thing. I'm like, I tip the barista all the time now because I know it was rough. So now it's just habit now. Before I'm like, just making coffee and I do it. Now I'm like, it's just like automatic.
I most likely lowered his hourly wage, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
Sorry.
All right, there we go. All right. Sorry, barista. There we go. So anyway, hey, guys, until next time, we'll be back with you soon on Block 'Em Out.